We're going to review passive and the things that we need to review, groups of verbs, the 5 steps of changing active to passive, 3 reasons why we use agents, and why passive is used, and then finally the formulas. So passive and verb usage, only transitive and ditransitive verbs can be used. Transitives take one object and ditransitive takes 2 or more. If it helps you to remember, di means 2 and in means none. So we have the intransitive and ditransitive can only be used for passive because in order to use passive, you have to have an object. Intransitive has no object, so we can't use it for passive. And usually, an intransitive verb is going to be stative or it's going to be followed by a preposition. So in other words, passive must have an object, and the verbs that can hold an object are transitive and ditransitive. And no passive if there's no object, and intransitive verbs do not have objects, and they're usually stative verbs or they have a preposition that come right after them. So the 5 steps to change active to passive. Number 1, you have to identify all the parts of the sentence. And if you notice right away that there's no object, then you definitely know it cannot be changed to passive. Number 2, you change the object to the subject position. You add a be verb, and then you make sure that it uses the correct verb tense from the active sentence as well as the correct form. And then finally, you change the main verb into past participle and then use an agent only when necessary. And we'll go over those agent rules. So here's an example with the 5 steps, and we have the sentence, the bank had informed her. So the first thing that we're supposed to do is identify all pieces of our sentence. So we have the bank, which is our subject, had informed, which is our verb, her is our object. Now our verb here is past perfect. Okay, so we have an auxiliary here, and we have our main verb here. Okay, so the next thing that we're supposed to do is move the object to the subject position. So object becomes the subject, which is she. Okay, and now our verb tense is past perfect, and we are supposed to use a be verb here. Okay, so we need to change be verb to past perfect, which is had been. Okay, and then we need to add past participle. This is our main verb. Our main verb is going to become our past participle, and it happens to be the same. Okay, and then last but not least, we're going to take our subject and we're going to move it into the agent position by the bank. Okay, and there's our passive sentence. She had been informed by the bank. Okay. Okay, let's look at another example. So this one, they are washing the car. So here's our active sentence, and step 1 is to identify the pieces of the sentence. So we have they is our subject, our washing is our verb, the car is our object. In our washing, we have a be verb and we have a present participle, so this is present progressive verb tense. Okay. Right now, step 2, we need to change our object into the subject position. So the car is our new subject. The car. And then we need a be verb that comes next. And our be verb, the verb tense, is going to be present progressive. So present progressive of be, the car is being. Okay, so we're going to change it to is instead of are because the car is singular. So we're going to use the car is, and then progressive is being. Now we need our past participle. Here's our main verb. It's going to become past participle here. Washing becomes washed. Okay, And then last but not least, we have our subject, and that should take our agent position. The car is being washed by them. Okay. Now this is actually incorrect, and the reason that it's incorrect is because our agent is not following the rules. Okay. In order for us to keep our agent, it must be new information, it must be specific information, or it must be surprising. It has to be at least one of these rules, and in this case it's not new, it's not specific, and it's definitely not surprising. So our answer is actually the car is being washed, and that's the end of our sentence. Okay, let's look at this next one. She is going to send an email. So again, we're going to go with step 1, identifying all parts of our sentence. We have she is our subject, is going to is our auxiliary. We have send, which is our main verb, and an email is our object. Now in this one, we have a special auxiliary, is going to send. So the first thing that we need to do is move our object into the subject position, so in email. And now we need a be verb. Okay. But before we put our be verb, actually what we need is our auxiliary. Okay, so our auxiliary is going to come straight down and fill this position right here. And we need to make sure our be verb in our auxiliary matches our subject. This is singular, so both of them work. So I can put this here. An email is going to. Now I can continue with my regular formula. I can put my be verb, and then I can put my main verb here, my past participle. Okay, so is going to be sent, and that's the end right there. Okay, so we have our answer is an email is going to be sent. She is going to send an email is going to be sent, right? So our object took the subject position, our auxiliary came straight down, and our main verb here became the past participle here. Okay, now let's take a look at using intransitive verb. So let's take a look at this one. I woke up early. So again, if we start with step 1, our subject is I, woke up is our verb. We have a phrasal verb. And then we have early. What is that? It's definitely not an object. An object is supposed to be a noun. And a noun is a person, place, or thing. And it is definitely not a person. It is definitely not a place, and it's definitely not a thing. That means it's not a noun. That means it's not an object. That means we cannot use passive. So we stop right there. Step 1. We don't have to change it. Let's take a look at one more. All right, so let's start with step 1, which is identify our pieces. So we have we is our subject, went is our verb, and then we have to and the store. Now the store, that's a place. Maybe it's even a thing. That looks like an object. But we have this little verb right here too, or this little word right here too, and this is not an object. This is a preposition. And when we have a preposition, we cannot use the passive. And that's what happens. So this is actually not an object. This is called a prepositional phrase. Prepositional. Okay, and when we have this prepositional phrase, we cannot use the passive. So we're done. Again, with step one, we just stop. We instantly realize that there's no object and we have to stop the process. Okay, so let's talk about agents. There's 3 reasons why we should use agents. Number 1 is if it is new information. And new information, so for example, applications are being accepted by both offices. And in this case, the new information would be both offices instead of just one office. Number 2 would be specific information. So for example, quinoa is grown by South American farmers. Here we have South American farmers. And finally, we have surprising information. So for example, the ESL class is being taught by a science teacher. That would be surprising information. Okay, so it must be new, specific, or surprising information. Okay, and now that we've gone over some of the examples of passive, it's just helpful to remember why we even use passive. One, when the agent, also known as the subject of the active, is unknown, not important, obvious or general knowledge, to keep a secret or avoid blame, or to emphasize or focus on the action or object, or sometimes both the action or object, or sometimes it's a combination of these two. All right, let's go over our formulas. So we have our first formula, subject plus be and past participle plus the rest of your sentence. So for example, it was returned yesterday. Now, usually I do a negative formula next, but I want to take a look at the yes or no formula because I want you to remember something. When you only have be, you're going to use that as your auxiliary. And just like I've said before, you're going to take your be, you're going to switch places with your subject, and it's going to become be plus subject plus past participle plus the rest of the sentence. So your answer will be, was it returned yesterday? Okay. Now let's go back to our negative formula. So we're going to start with our subject. And so our example sentence will be, it wasn't returned yesterday. Okay, so it was returned yesterday. Was it returned yesterday? It wasn't returned yesterday. And last but not least, let's look at our WH formula. Okay, which looks like this, WH plus be plus subject plus past. Okay. So, where was it returned? Now I'm going to do the yes or no formula again right here because I want you to see
I want you to see that our WH formula and our yes or no formula are exactly the same. If you see, these all stay the same. The only thing new here is the WH. It just gets put in front of your WH question. Now, one more thing I want to show you guys is when you have more than one auxiliary, your formula follows a little bit differently. Okay, so for example, we could say something like, it should be returned. So we have subject, we have our auxiliary, we have our be verb, and we have our main verb, our past participle. Okay. Now if I want to change this to a question, I have a choice between two different auxiliaries. So I've got auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2 here. And whenever you have two auxiliaries, you always take the first one and that moves into the subject position and switches with the subject. Your be is going to stay right here, nice and cozy next to your, they're in love, nice and cozy next to your main verb. So your answer will look like this. Should it be returned, right? So again, this comes straight down and it stays together. Should comes out to the front and it comes next. Okay, let's look at some examples and let's see if you can work through these and figure out the answer. So number 1 says we're going shopping next week. Number 2 says he sold his truck. Number 3, someone broke the dish. And number 5, the air conditioning is broken. So if you follow the steps for number 1, you should be able to figure it out. Identify all the pieces: subject, auxiliary, main verb, object. Move the object into the subject position. Add a be verb. Change the main verb to past participle. Same thing with number 2. Identify all the pieces. Object moves to subject position. Add a be verb. Change main verb to past participle. Okay, so here are the answers. For number 1, there is no change. Okay, so we have shopping is our main verb. And next week, okay, this is not an object. And because it's not an object, we cannot change to passive. So there is no change here. Okay, and we can just stop right there. So he sold his truck. We have he is the subject, sold is the verb, his truck is the object. So his truck becomes the new subject. We need a be verb. It's simple past here. Was. And then main verb is sold. The end. His truck was sold. Someone broke the dish. Someone is our subject. Broke is our verb. The dish is our object. So the dish becomes our new subject. We need a be verb, simple past, main verb, past participle, the end. Okay, we can't use he and we can't use someone for our agent because these are not specific surprising, or new. Finally, we have the air conditioning is broken, so the air conditioning is our subject. We have is our verb. We have broken. This is an adjective. Okay, it's not an object. Okay, so we cannot change.